And welcome back to the Digital Education Station, everyone. I'm Ryan Ferran, the Chief Communications Officer for the Arcadia Unified School District, joined by a full team of researchers today. It's an absolute privilege for you guys to be here. Far right is Dr. Alan Daly from UC San Diego, who's leading this research project, and you brought two guests with you this time, your research team. Thrilled they are here. Can you officially introduce Nicolette and Mimi for us?
Of course. First of all, it's a real pleasure to be here, and thanks for having us back again, Ryan. We just think so highly of the Arcadia Unified School District, so it's a real privilege for us to be here, as you said. So this work, like our work together in partnership, doesn't happen singularly. We're part of a much bigger team, and we got to have a couple of our folks here, so I'll introduce them to you. This is Nicolette van Halem, who hails from the Netherlands. So we import the best and the brightest to help us do our work. And Nicolette is currently a doctoral student at the Free University in Amsterdam and does amazing work around personalized learning and student voice and choice and instructional approaches, and is just a phenomenal talent on so many different levels, and I'm really privileged to work closely with her. And next to her is an equally amazing colleague. This is Dr. Mimi Lockton, and Mimi is a fantastic researcher. She was very wise and did her degree at UC San Diego, so we're proud to call her an alumni, and does really nice work on teacher collaboration and is heading up a lot of our qualitative work. So this team is a rock star team, much like the team here in Arcadia.
Thank you for that, and thanks for bringing the team. Yeah. So last time you were here, it was just you and I in the Digital Education Station. A lot of views on that video, by the way.
Oh, really?
Glad
okay.
to have you back.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a ratings hit.
More than just my family?
You know, that's many, unless you have a very large family.
No.
So we were talking about kind of the why of why we're doing this. You study school culture and climate, why it's so important, the relationships in those cultures and climates. So if people, we're not going to dive too deep into that today because we did that last time. I'll put the link below this video so people can reference that. But let's talk a little bit about kind of where we've come, where we've been in the process to date. From last year when we met, we were just pushing out, begging people to take the survey, and people responded. So just an overall update where we've been and where we are now.
Great, fantastic, thanks Ryan. First of all, I'm going to look directly to the audience and just say thank you, because what you're about to hear is how amazing all of you were. And so we'll talk a little bit about where we were since the last time we were together on apparently one of the most popular interviews of the entire district. So I don't know, we're going to have to work really hard to top this. Luckily, I brought talented people to make that happen.
Absolutely.
So as you'll recall, we were just getting ready to go and literally begging people. Yeah. We felt really fortunate here because in a lot of other places, we don't have this level of partnership that we have here in Arcadia. And all of you just opened up your doors and your minds and your hearts to all of us. And that has made what we've done over the last 8 months or so amazing. So we'll tell you a little bit about that. But first, let's just frame up a little bit about the work that we're doing. So this is a research practice partnership. So we're deeply interested in the research element, we're deeply interested in the practice element, and the partnership is what makes it go. So I'm going to invite Mimi just to talk a little bit about how we frame up a research practice partnership and why that's so critical for our work here in Arcadia.
Perfect.
Mimi?
Yeah, so there's been historically a split between the research and the practice side, with a lack of communication between the two. And now that we have more frequently partnerships between researchers and practitioners, between universities and districts, the partnership really enhances both. So building on these relationships, having elevating the voices of the students, of the parents, of the teachers, of the staff, as we work together to elevate all of those voices and to make sense of them, it enhances not only the research, but it also enhances the practice, and that partnership is that special sauce for both. So that's what we're
all about partnerships in Arcadia. So it just makes sense because we can't do this work alone, no matter what area of education you're talking about. So we really do like the partnership aspect of this. So that's phenomenal.
Yeah, I think this is what's really important here is that you've got the chocolate of the university and the peanut butter of the district, and you put them together and you have something even better, right? And I think what's really at the heart of what Mimi beautifully described is the vulnerability that actually takes for each partner to engage in this work. You're opening yourselves up in your community to us, And in turn, we're opening ourselves up to learn and be vulnerable and to do a lot of things we haven't done before. This is only our second interview together and our first as a team. So we get to have a lot of really nice, exciting experiences. Now, the moment probably you've been waiting for.
Of course.
Some drum roll probably is happening somewhere in the
insert
surface.
that,
Let's talk a little bit about what we actually gathered and just the sheer scope of what we gathered, because I think it's so incredibly impressive. And to talk a little bit about that, I'll invite my colleague Nicolette, who's just been instrumental in helping to really make this all go. So Nicolette, talk a little bit about what we gathered and
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, because we are extremely grateful for the responses that we got, because we in total got over 2,500 people in the survey, which is amazing, which I've never seen these numbers before personally in my work. And so what Mimi mentioned, we aim to elevate the voices of the whole community, everyone involved in Arcadia Unified School District. So in total, we invited 7 different groups of stakeholders. We invited leaders, teachers, certificated staff, classified staff at the district level and at the school level. We invited parents, students, of course. Did I forget a group? Because I feel like I'm rambling on about all these different groups. Over 1,500 students actually participated in our survey on different grade levels. And we asked them about so many different elements of their experiences in school and in the district. We asked about relationships, about culture and climate, about leadership, about instructional approaches. So, and I can go on and on and on about all the different domains that we touched upon.
So let's talk a little bit about what grade levels, as far as students that took the survey, and then maybe just like how many questions and a little bit more about what types of questions. If I'm a parent, I'm kind of wondering, so what did my student answer about? So what grade levels and kind of a little bit more about the questions and how many questions. It was a in-depth survey for sure.
Yeah, so I do not have the exact number of questions because I don't want to scare you with that. No, in total, if you would add all the questions of all the different groups, we have more than hundreds of questions that we asked. So for students, we kept it a bit limited to not overwhelm them. Okay. So our focus for the students was on the culture and climate in the school, the feeling of belongingness in the school, safety, but also instructional approaches. So how they experience their day-to-day lessons and interactions with their teachers and their peers, and how they feel they can influence their own learning process and how they feel supported by their environment.
And so that was 3rd graders, 6th graders, 9th graders, and 12th graders from last year.
Correct.
Right?
Exactly.
Okay, and then so for people I guess who took the survey, myself included, there's so many questions, and that is what makes this process so lengthy, but gets such valuable data because it was so lengthy and involved. So after you get the data back, then your process really begins. So Alan, what is that process, and what are some of the things you do with the data? How do you dice it and slice it and all that fun stuff you guys do and enjoy doing?
Great. And you mentioned a couple times the lengthiness. There's also the enjoyment of just contributing to this larger undertaking. But I do want to speak to the length of it for the adults. This isn't so much true for the students because we're really mindful. For us, it was really important to do a deep dive. And from what the district asked for, they asked for a deep dive, which we actually think says a lot about the district, that they're interested in really going deeply and trying to understand what's going on. And from our standpoint, it was an incredible gift that people bestowed upon us and bestowed upon the district. Our response rates were very high across the board. In fact, one of the things we can do is give a big shout out to every one of your leaders here in this district. We had 100% of them respond, which was fantastic. And we had equally high response rates across all of our stakeholder groups. So we're really thrilled about the generosity and gift of people's time. It indicates to us that people value their community here, and they value the connections that they have, and that's really important to us. So as all this data comes in, we're in the process now, as you can imagine, as Nicolette described, we have 2,500 individuals that gave us responses on hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of items if you look across all the groups. So this is an enormous amount of data. So we are in, from a research standpoint, a joyful place of the cleaning and trying to organize all of this data because it's quite a bit, right? So you keep in mind that we're collecting data from all of the schools in the district, from the central office in the district. It's a lot of also management because we have to think you're not just one big unit. It's part of it. You also got these individual schools, so we have to think about what's happening.
That's a good point, because I was thinking about it from the lens of I took the survey and my questions, but then the parent one is different, the student one is different. There's more questions, there's more, so that helps explain the whole data and how involved it is. So that's impressive.
The questions are different, but they all evolve around the same domains. So that's how we get a multi-perspective on one domain, for example, culture and climate or relationships.
So what would be an example, I guess, of getting that same thought from a parent, how they feel the school culture and climate is? What's the energy? Is it positive, negative? So how do you elicit that information from a parent lens, and how you ask the question from a student lens and then an administrator lens? How differently do you need to ask those questions to get what you want?
Yeah, I think to really think about that question, you have to understand that, and I'm going to use trust as an example because it's a pretty clear one. I think a lot of the listeners will be familiar with it. So if we think about trust as a construct, we don't ever measure trust with just one item, for example, right? This is sort of like akin to that parable where somebody's trying to describe an elephant, like 5 blind men are trying to describe an elephant, right? And one of them has a hole of the tail, one of them has a hole of the trunk, one of them has a hole of the leg, and each of them, their own lived experience is true because that's what they're looking at that moment in time, right? So I've got a hole of the elephant's tail and I'm like, oh, this animal is like a snake, for example, right? Somebody's holding a trunk might think of it very differently. So in this analogy, if we think about trust as the elephant in this case, then what we want to do as researchers is we want to look at not just the tail, but we want to look at the tail and the trunk and the leg and all other manner of parts, the ear and all other manner of parts of the elephant. Because by doing that, then you intersect all these different things to understand a construct. So even within the parent survey or the student survey or the administrator survey, we're saying this elephant named trust, we want you to grab it from all different parts, and then we as researchers can say, okay, we're going to collect all that, and this represents trust. Okay. So now back to your more specific question. So what we're doing when we ask the parents or ask the students or ask the administrators or ask the teachers is we're asking them all similarly related things around trust, each from their own perspective. And because each is taking their own perspective, we want to honor their view of where they're coming from, right? So maybe we ask a question of a parent, to what degree do you feel the school listens to my concerns? So this idea about listening and transparency and integrity is an important element of trust. So from a student level, we might say, to what degree do you feel your principal cares about you, right? From a leader level, we might say something like, do I feel like I belong in my group? So all variations on trust, all multiple items that help us to understand this one construct. Now, that's just trust. As Nicolette said, we've probably got 15 or so other domains if you broke them all out. And so now imagine we're trying to construct multiple items per domain by stakeholder group. And you start to get a little bit of the idea of the complexity of this work. And an important point on this is that the way that we've crafted the items is to be behaviorally based. So the goal is that when you start to dissect and look at the data, you can actually look at some actual behaviors. Because our goal, like your goal, is continuous improvement and growth. And what we find so powerful here is that this district is about that growth and about that transparency. And for us, that's critical because we walk into a system and we already have that established.
And for us, we believe we have great leaders, great teachers, great staff, but we know there's room for improvement. That's why we're doing this. This is why we're asking all the stakeholders. So that's why we're here. One of the things that I think is fascinating, having sat with you guys yesterday and looking at some different data points, was not only do you measure the school culture and climate, but the relationships among them.
Yeah.
So I'm going to pop up one of those charts which shows the dots, what they represent, and then the connections I find so fascinating.
Yeah.
Can you kind of explain how you get that, why that's important, and kind of what that represents, and then how that helps us as a district, knowing the relationships, what needs to be worked on? And then another interesting point for me is that those dots are all anonymous,
Yeah.
and there's a reason for that.
Yep. Talk a little bit
Yeah, why? Explain that process. It's fascinating and great information.
Yeah, so I'll start and then maybe my colleagues can jump in. So I think what we have to really do, we're a huge fan of your superintendent. We think he's really a thoughtful guy. And he sent out a letter, actually, to the entire district community about Better Together, which is what we call this project, Better Together, and articulated beautifully that at the end of the day, the most important thing that goes on here in Arcadia is about the relationships and how those relationships serve greater purposes, like achievement and connectedness and success in life and feeling a sense of commitment to the place where I work. So at the very essence, if we to boil everything down, it's about relationships. And so the work that you're talking about, and that maybe some of the folks at home can see on the screen, that's called the social network. And so what we're interested in doing, part of the cutting edge work that we do that not a lot of people in the world do, is we actually try to map out those sets of relationships. And your leaders have been wonderful because they've been willing to engage with us in this, and so we can map those out. And this picture that you're seeing is something that represents what that might look like. And the lines between folks represent the sharing of whatever that resource might be. It might be collaboration, for example, which is unbelievably strong among your leadership group here, I should say. And you brought up a really good point, because as the viewers can see, when you have one of these maps, there are no names listed on this. And that's very intentional. Many school districts, when they try to engage in improvement, start at very discrete levels of improvement. So maybe for a long time in education, we looked at a school, we opened up the roof of the school, we tinkered around and we closed the roof and we're like, there, it's fixed. Yeah. But in fact, schools are embedded in larger district systems, which are embedded in the community. So our idea is that we've got to really take a systems perspective on things. We've got to look at the interaction between these different parts. Dr. Martin Luther King says in a really wonderful letter that he wrote, we're in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. And I think those words are so powerful because we are in this inescapable network of mutuality. And what we can do in our work is we can show that. And the reason we don't name people is because if we had one of these graphs and you could point to somebody who's kind of on the outside and you could say, oh, there's Alan, poor Alan, let's help Alan out. And the system is really good about rallying around to help out Alan, which is actually great for anybody named Alan. But it's actually not helpful to the larger system. So if the question the system was asking itself is, what do we need to do to make sure everybody's connected? That sets us on a completely different trajectory of action than what do we need to do to make sure Alan feels like he's connected. You see what I mean? So the power here is thinking about ourselves as part of a system and not just the employees or the students of the Arcadia School District, but the entire community. We're part of something bigger. And when we understand that connection to a larger purpose, amazing things can happen.
I appreciate you explaining that, because you see the bigger dots and that means there's more connections, and then the arrows about who they're connecting with and which way it's going, and to give people a glimpse of just one data set, how involved it is, how much it can help us. Because as you alluded to, Dr. Van Alstall's letter and the theme of this year being Better Together, the theme of the survey as well, Better Together, it really, our relationships with our staff, our community, it all comes back to doing this work to better educate kids. The better we get along, the better we can support children, and that's the bottom line. Is all this work is getting our kids better.
Yeah, I think we're, if I can wax poetic, as scholars will do, I think we're in a renaissance of relationship nowadays. I think it's not just about reading, writing, and arithmetic anymore. I actually think it's reading, writing, arithmetic, and relationships. And network literacy, the ability to understand and connect to people in deep and meaningful ways, is going to become increasingly more important. Certainly, if you look at what employers are looking for, they're looking for folks that can collaborate, connect, communicate in ways that really draw people in. And people want a sense of belonging. They want to feel like they're connected to a larger purpose. And you all are really deeply engaged in that work in ways that we haven't seen in other places.
So for full transparency, speaking of transparency, we're filming this before our community engagement meeting this evening, and we do these videos at Digital Education Station to give people another opportunity who may not be able to be at the meeting, insights into it, and give them another avenue to see what's going on, learn about our district and this Better Together initiative that we're doing. So by the time this video comes out, it'll be after the community engagement meeting, parent meeting, but we still want to give them the opportunity for that information. So what will be some of the things you will discuss tonight? And now that we're watching the video, it'll be that you've already discussed with the parents and the folks at the community meeting.
Yeah. So Nicolette, maybe I'll ask you just touch on some of what we're talking about, and then I'll fill in I'll wax philosophic afterwards.
So what we truly believe is that we can provide some insights in the data. We can share scores, we can share averages per skill. But what's really the magic sauce is the conversation around the data. So tonight we will focus on student data and parent and community data. We will share a bit about these concepts, trust, culture and climate, belongingness, and then we hope to engage in a conversation with the community to get their reflection on the data. And well, they were the people that filled out the survey, and we're super curious to hear what they think about the data if we present it to them. And we will walk through it step by step, provide some insights on the different items, the different questions we asked on the survey, so they really get a sense of what these constructs that we measured from so many angles really embody.
Yeah.
And then to give them a further opportunity, if our live stream worked, they can go and watch the link to the meeting that we live streamed on Facebook tonight, and so hopefully they can see that as well.
Yeah.
If it worked.
And
Yes.
I
That's
think,
our plan.
Yeah, exactly. That would be great. And I
Yeah.
think what's really important to mention is that this will have a follow-up online in a thought exchange, because we really hope this will be a conversation that not only takes place tonight, but will be taking place throughout the next weeks, where people can interact and share their views and opinions.
Yeah.
Mimi, please.
We've talked a lot about relationships, and you were going to show the network graph of the relationships. But I think it's important to remember that relationships aren't a static thing, that they're constantly reperformed between individuals and in groups. So by sharing this data with the community and starting that conversation, it's helping you to shape your relationships together and with us as well.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
I'm glad you mentioned the thought exchange, because that is still open right now, and that's something we've been doing in addition to this work for the past 5 years, and that's another transparent process where people go on, leave their thoughts, and then other people can go and see those thoughts, star if they agree, disagree. So people, for some reason, didn't have a chance to do the Better Together survey. The thought exchange is still open. It's on our website, ausd.net. They can go on there and still give us their feedback. So I appreciate the link and tie-in to getting this feedback, because we do believe we're doing great things with great people, but there's areas of improvement, so we love the feedback.
Yeah, I think this is a really important idea, and Nicolette and Mimi both said this beautifully, that the best case for us after this evening is that we've engendered and catalyzed some conversation, right? Don't get too hung up in the number part of it.
Yeah.
Think about the dialogue, because it's through dialogue, whether that's face-to-face or in some virtual space like what you're describing, that's where communities get built and get grown and get developed, right? And I think the other critical thing is, I think about our work together. I think as we look across and we're thinking about this preliminary data, what we recognize is that there are 3 really important themes that come out here for us. And one of them has to do with community. The importance and critical foundation of community in all of this work. And when we talk about community, we're not just talking about the parents and the businesses and whatnot in the wider community. We're talking about Arcadia Unified School District as a community, which encompasses those people that live near and entrust their most valuable resource to all of you, right? So community is a big thing that comes out, really important. People feel this sense of connected. The second big theme that comes out is around collaboration. So the importance that we actually are better together, that I'm actually at my best when you're at your best, and you're at your best when I'm at my best. And then the third important element that comes out is this idea about coherence. How are we moving together as a system? And tonight you'll hear us talk about this idea called murmuration. I'm not going to say any more about that because I hope it's enough of a tease to have people to come, but we'll talk about this idea about murmuration and how we think about the district as actually reflecting this idea.
So tonight we're sharing, last night, earlier in the week, we shared with the community at the meeting preliminary results and starting to get those conversations going. What are some of the next steps as we move forward with you guys as far as continuing this Better Together process and working on school culture and climate?
Yeah. Well, as the data is preliminary, you will imagine that the team and I will be burning the midnight oil. The wonderful thing about having colleagues from around the world working on this project is that because the Netherlands is 9 hours ahead of us, we can work on something. We go to sleep, we wake up in the morning, and Nicolette has miraculously worked on it. And
24 hours, someone's working for you.
It's always a lot. And thank God with 2,500 data points and hundreds of questions and 7 stakeholder groups, you need more than 24 hours in a day. So our next step is we're working on refining and cleaning up the data. So still be preliminary data. So that's step 1. Step 2 is we're going to be engaged in round 2 of data collection, or as we like to think about it, round 2 of begging. And so part of our hope is that when we share this information back as we're digesting it in process, that this will excite people, and when the survey comes out, the lengthy but enjoyable survey, they will greet their inbox with a smile and take the survey. So we'll be doing a process sometime the start of 2020, January-ish, more or less. We're still working out some of the final details based on when we finalize our report. So next steps will be the survey. The other really exciting thing is that we're also engaged in talking with people in the system and really trying to understand those voices also from a qualitative standpoint, right? So the quantitative data tells us something, the rich voices of people tell us something else. And so that's not the primary focus of our work, but it's become an increasingly important focus of our work. And in the spirit of also transparency and vulnerability, that we've sort of been a theme in our conversation here today. So tonight will be the first time that we're actually doing one of these community-wide experiences. Most districts, we report back to the board or certainly the school district itself, and then the board themselves in different places will share that information with the community. Tonight, we're really excited because this is one of the first times that we're inviting the community to come and look at the preliminary data. Now, we had a community night last year, which from our standpoint, we felt it was like a fantastic experience for us. We felt so welcomed and everyone was so gracious to us, and it just gave us enough energy to step outside of our comfort zone and say, okay, let's come back tonight. So we're also appreciative that we can learn and grow and co-design and co-share and be vulnerable with all of you in doing our work.
So this is the first time you've done this sort of thing with the open community looking at some of the data?
Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
So it's exciting for us. So and our experiences here in Arcadia make the experience not that scary because everybody has been so gracious and open that for us, we're just super excited. If you can't tell, we're just super excited about it.
And I did mention the survey is a little lengthy, but it is actually enjoyable because you do think the way the questions are asked are very thought-provoking because it'll ask you, so who are you connected, who's your go-to person? So you start to think for myself, who do I usually go to? And then vice versa, who comes to me, who can come to me? And then how do you feel about this? So it is a I enjoyed going through it because it gets your mind thinking about how do I see myself as a support, who can rely on me, how do I feel about certain things? So it actually is enjoyable. And so for parents and students to actually sit down and ask yourself those questions to get a better understanding of how do I feel about the school, the district, my principal, my teachers, and all that thing, it actually is an enjoyable process.
Yeah, I think this is a really important point, Ryan, that we as researchers often don't talk about. We really carefully designed these instruments. We've worked really hard to make them good. And part of it does provide space for reflection. So here you are in your computer in your office or in your home or your classroom, and you're asking questions that people aren't normally asking you every day.
Right.
Like, how do you think about your relationships, and do you feel safe, and do you feel the place is welcoming to me? Do you feel like a loyalty to the place in which you work? Rarely do those conversations enter into our daily lexicon of interaction. And so creating the sacred space and safe space to actually reflect on those in a way, knowing that sitting across the system there are 2,499 other folks that are also taking that moment in time to think about things, is actually quite a powerful notion. Right?
It's very interesting. So we appreciate you guys being here. We are better together with the whole research team here. We look forward to the meeting tonight. People can look for the Thought Exchange link on our website, the link to the meeting below this, and our previous interview giving more of the why in the background as well. So we appreciate you guys' time, your thoughts, and going through that massive amount of data. Better you guys than us. So thank you so much. We appreciate it. And we look forward to continuing in the future. Thank you
Here
guys.
too.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.